you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. To all our other guests, thank you very much for being with us. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, assalamu alaikum. Good evening, good night, or good morning to all of you. We are so pleased to have people at this meeting from all parts of the world in different time zones. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago, teacher for the past 17 years. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the 267th edition of our ICC Thought Leaders Forum. We wish to sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora global project. For 266 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 5 years, 1 month, and 3 weeks, we have featured 1,287 presenters from all parts of the world, speaking on 266 topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And like today, we often partner with the Amina Ghafoor Institute for the Study of Indentureship and its Legacies, led by Professor David Davidine. In order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are kindly asking for suggestions as well as volunteers. If you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for details. There were 3 events this past week which we would like to highlight. Indian Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi visited Trinidad and Tobago the past week, having accepted the invitation from the recently appointed Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. So it was a very successful trip. Today is the 10th day of the Islamic month of Muharram and the final day of Hussein, which is a commemoration originally by Shia Muslims to remember the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. The observance today, known as the Day of Ashura, features tassel-led parades with elaborately designed model mausoleums called tajas, and it culminates in a procession through St. James and Citrus of Trinidad to the sea where the tajas are sunken. We also wish to extend condolences to the family and relatives of Hans Hanuman Singh, who passed away at age 84. He was a veteran broadcaster and cultural advocate, and he was the president of the National Council for Indian Culture for many years, and was the leader who conceptualized the first ever Diwali Nagar. His exquisite voice graced us on Melodies of India on Radio Guardian Trinidad, and he will be missed. So I'll introduce our moderator today, who is Shalima Mohammed, the co-director of this ICC Zoom platform, who's a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. Shalima, welcome.
Thank you very much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Namaste, and a warm welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for choosing to be here with us. This program is being recorded on Zoom and live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. Welcome to all of you on YouTube at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, to avoid intrusions from trolls, our IT manager has muted everyone. Speakers, please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and do not allow anyone to share your screen. Interestingly, this morning I received a call from a number that has been traced to Nigeria. They called and invited me to a Zoom meeting tonight about a tour that our ICC is reportedly organizing to Trinidad. So I want to thank those persons. They're possibly looking at us on YouTube at this time. I want to thank them very much for having an interest in the ICC, but I'd like to say that we handle our promotions ourselves. And while we appreciate your interest, we would like to ask you to please desist. Kindly avoid contacting anyone on our behalf unless we ask you to do so. So to members of the audience, I want to please make you aware that there are persons out there who are using the ICC name and may be contacting you. Please, you all know who we are. Contact us if you need to discuss anything about our tours or programs. I want to thank you very much. Let's get on with today's program. And today we are talking about world-renowned scientists of the Indian diaspora. And indeed, we are happy to have some of them with us. Recognizing world-renowned scientists of the Indian diaspora is significant, as it highlights the global contributions of individuals of Indian heritage to the advancement of science, technology, and innovation. Excelling in diverse fields such as epidemiology and virology, reproductive medicine, tuberculosis, and mangrove forests and seagrass beds, these scientists serve as powerful symbols of excellence, resilience, and academic achievement. Celebrating their work not only honors their personal accomplishments, but also inspires future generations, fosters international collaboration, and strengthens the identity and pride of diasporic communities. So without further ado, let me introduce our first scientist today, and this is Professor Salim Abdul Karim of South Africa. An epidemiologist and virologist, he's the director of CAPRISA, an AIDS research institute in Durban, and serves as special advisor on pandemics to the Director General of the World Health Organization. Welcome, Professor Salim. You have 15 minutes for your presentation, after which we will take some questions from members of the audience.
Thank you very much. It's indeed a great pleasure and an honor to be here with you this evening in South Africa. I'm doing this presentation on behalf of my wife and I, Qureisha Abdul Karim, myself, and I'll use the royal we occasionally, and so you'll know that it refers to my wife and I. So I'm going to talk about tackling AIDS in Africa. Both my wife and I have a heritage in South Africa when our forefathers arrived here some 100 years ago. So we are now third generation South Africans, and we still have some links with India. We have relatives there, but we don't have that much of a link with India. Though I have to say, we still enjoy Bollywood movies, we still enjoy our curries, and we still enjoy all the things that make us and strengthen our Indian heritage. So tackling AIDS in Africa. So our research has focused on the two highest priorities of HIV in the world. The first is, one of the biggest challenges is to focus on HIV treatment, and in Africa, the biggest causes of death in HIV, and that's referring to some 20 years ago when we first started this work, was TB and HIV co-infection. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. But the bulk of our work has focused on the high rates of HIV in young women. And if you look at this graph, you can see the red line rises much faster and higher at the age of 15 to 19. And so the young girls, teenage girls, bear the brunt of the HIV epidemic in Africa. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. So if we look at our initial challenge in 2001, when treatment first became available in Africa, we were grappling with this problem of how do you treat patients who have both tuberculosis and HIV. And we developed a clinical trial, which we undertook looking at 3 different strategies to treat these patients. And we showed that if you follow the strategy we used, that you could reduce the deaths by 56%. And that if it was implemented in South Africa, it would avert something like about 10,000 deaths a year. And so these two papers published in the New England Journal of Medicine led to a rapid advice from the WHO. So rapid advice is when they don't want to wait for the regular development of advice, they release a rapid advice based on our research, advising the world how to treat patients with tuberculosis and HIV. In South Africa, our president adopted it, and in 2009, and used this approach that we had developed. And we saw how over the 5 years subsequent to that, the number of deaths fell by about 52% each year, partly as a result of our research. And our research has now been adopted in most countries in the world, including, if you look at the top right-hand side, that's the US CDC guidelines. That's also based in South Africa. So on the research done in South Africa. So a patient with TB and HIV anywhere in the world, if they're being treated according to WHO guidelines, they're being treated based on our research to some extent. So now let's focus on prevention and this challenge that I talk about the high rates of HIV in young women. So this is a study that Croatia undertook in rural South Africa, just about an hour from where we are based in Durban. And in this study, which looks at boys and girls in grades 9 and 10, so remember, these are high school students, and we enrolled several thousand of these youngsters. And when we look at the prevalence of HIV, you can see that the HIV rate in boys ranging from just below 15 years to just over 20 years ranges from between 1% to 1.8%. So that's the situation of HIV prevalence in these young boys. Now let's look at the situation in girls. Drastically different. Already by age 15, 2.6% of these girls have HIV infection. By the time they reach the age of 20, we're talking about 1 out of every 4 girls. And remember, these are grade 9 and 10 students have HIV. That's the level of the challenge we're facing, incredibly high rates of HIV in these young girls. So we did a study that in which we sequenced thousands of viruses from a community, from the same community where we did the study. We were trying to understand the transmission dynamics. What's the source of the infection in these young girls? And when we look at it, what we found is what we described as the cycle of HIV transmission, where men in their 30s were infecting these young girls, these adolescent girls, and that these girls, when they got the infection, and when they grew up and when reached their 30s, they would then infect the next group of men in their 30s who will infect the next group of young girls. Those girls grow up, they reach 30, they infect men. And so that's how the cycle continues. And that's part of the reason why HIV is so difficult to deal with in Africa. It's the cycle that's caught, and we have great difficulty breaking the cycle. So when we published our research on the cycle of transmission, within a matter of 4 months, the UNAIDS released their report. And their report is based on our research, and they talk about it as the life cycle approach to HIV. And they took our very complicated diagram from the Lancet, and they made it into a very simple diagram with orange and blue lines, just showing how young girls are getting infected from men in their 30s and how they grow up, and then they infect the next group of men who infect the next group of girls. That diagram and that report has been adopted by several countries in Africa, and in our own country, in South Africa, the National Strategic Plan lists the breaking of the cycle of transmission as the #1 goal. And you can see that in the South African plan, they took the same diagram as from the UNAIDS report. They just changed the colors. They called it infection pathway. And so what we're seeing is our very complicated research being made simple, interpretable, and now it's being owned by others who are making it their own diagrams. And that challenge of high rates in young women, which we first described back in 1990, so that goes back 35 years, Since then, we have been trying several things. We've started off by making an nanoxynol 9 film. We worked with a company in the US. We sent them the nanoxynol 9. They made a film for us. We studied it. Didn't work. We've studied so many things. We studied Pro 2000 gel. We studied buffer gel. These studies we undertook over a period of 18 years. Over 18 years, all we did was fail. In fact, when we go to the AIDS conference and we stand up to present, they widely refer to us as the experts in failure, because that's all we reported. Every meeting after meeting, we just reported one more failure about what we were trying to do. We were trying to make some kind of technology for women to protect themselves from HIV without success. But all that changed. It changed in 2010 when we announced at the Vienna AIDS conference that we had successfully found that tenofovir gel, which we had manufactured together with the product, the actual molecule of tenofovir, which we got from Gilead Sciences. And we made this gel and we studied it in these women, and we showed that we could protect women from HIV using this gel. When we presented it at the International AIDS Conference and published it in Science, it received a standing ovation at the conference, and it was regarded as one of the top 10 breakthroughs of the year by the journal Science. It was also one of Lancet's Paper of the Year in 2010. It was front page headlines on the 20th of July, 2010 across newspapers all over the world, Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. And this finding, which is the basis of today what is known as PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis. So what we showed is that an antiretroviral drug can prevent sexual transmission. And the same drug, tenofovir, is now the recommended form of pre-exposure prophylaxis, tenofovir-based PrEP, except that we don't use the gels, we use it in the tablets. The tablets are just as effective as the gel. And when we published, when we first developed the idea in 2003, and we started the trial in 2006, we produced our results in 2010. It took another 5 years and several other trials in 2015 for WHO to make it a recommendation. And then eventually in 2017, so just think about it, that's 14 years after we started, South Africa finally adopted it and made it available in South Africa. And our work has been captured in many different places, and I've just shared with you here where we were profiled in the Wall Street Journal. This is the front page of the issue in March of 2018, and they gave us a page spread to show us, to portray the work that we've done. And last year we successfully obtained and received the Lasker Prize, and part of receiving the Lasker Prize is you get a coverage in various journals that capture your work. So one of the things we do is we do research. The second thing we do is we advise and provide our scientific information and our evidence. We provide it and make it available to policymakers across the globe. We advise the Secretary General of the United Nations. We advise the Executive Director of UNAIDS, the Director General of the World Health Organization. So we provide scientific advice to many different individuals based on our research and the research done on others. But one of the other things we do is we do public education. So public engagement in science for us is very important, particularly challenging disinformation. And you'll see here that over the last 5 years, from 1st of January 2020 to the end of last year, we had 3,172 print media articles. In other words, roughly about 2 per day, every day over those 5 years. So we have quite a large footprint in the media, again, debunking incorrect information, promoting good science, promoting evidence-based approaches to dealing with HIV. If you look at broadcast and TV and radio, again, we average about 2 per day over that 5-year period, and then online. So overall, we're averaging about a media mention, a media story, whether it's in print or online or broadcast, roughly one every 2 hours. And we get a substantial number of social media mentions largely picking up on that. And the top 7 countries for our media coverage is the US, UK, Vietnam, Canada, India, China, and South Africa. And one of the last things I want to touch on is that not only do we engage in our research, but we also are involved in training the next generation of scientists. We put a huge amount of emphasis on that. And in providing our training, we have over a period of 22 years, from 1993 to 2015, with funding from the Fogarty AIDS International Program, we've provided training to over 600 AIDS researchers. In fact, if almost every significant AIDS study or research project being done in South Africa is being done mostly by our trainees. And each year at our center, we take about 100 postgraduate students, we take master's, doctoral, and postdoctoral students, and we have exchange programs who are in Vietnam or the whole range of other places where they send us students and we send them students. So for us, building that next generation is absolutely critical. So we do research, we provide advice, and we impact on policy and programs. We are engaging with the public on public education. We are training the next generation. And lastly, we build all of that through multiple collaborations. We have collaborations with over 250 different groups and scientists across the world, because that's what helps build our resilience and ensures that we are sharing and learning from others at the same time as building capacity overall. Thank you very much.
Excellent work. Excellent work. And we cannot thank you enough, and thank your wife as well, Dr. Quraisha Abdul Karim. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to open the floor to questions. Like Jay Nair is currently waiting, his hand is up. I'll invite you to please raise your electronic hands. You can find that in the reactions button at the base of your screen. Kindly raise your electronic hand so that I can call upon you. Jay, welcome. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, good evening, Dr. Karim. This is Jay Nair, Billy Nair's brother. I want to commend you and the gang for doing so commendable work on HIV/AIDS. I just have 2 questions. One, how is the US aid funding affecting you? And secondly, how about education for the children from kindergarten right up to matric? What is the plan on that? Because that's where you have to sow the seeds. And I'm looking at Billy Nair's, what you call, I think he has a program in Natal, which is inheritance, that's looking after his Billy Nair, what we call a group education program. Those are the 2 questions.
Should I proceed to answering them, Shalima?
Certainly.
Okay, thanks. Well, for those not familiar, Billy Nair is an icon of our anti-apartheid struggle, a great, great activist, leader, somebody who we have deeply admired over the years and a good friend. So we largely are funded from the US government, principally from an organization called the National Institutes of Health, the NIH. And they are the principal funders. We, as a result of the Trump administration, we have had all our USAID projects terminated, and most of our NIH projects also terminated. So we've lost about 51% of our budget. That translates into about $6 million a year. So we've lost about that $6 million, and now we have to make that up. So we've had to retrench a few staff, and that's been a problem, but mostly we've been writing grants, and now we're widening our base for our funding. And so we anticipate that this will be, quite a serious hit for us. It'll take us another year or two before we can fully recover. As far as school education is concerned, we actually have a pretty good program in this country for educating on sexually transmitted infections, including AIDS. But the problem with young girls is not one of knowledge. The problem with young girls is a more systemic problem, in that young girls, it is accepted within this community that they have relationships with older men. And that is a problem. And that's what we've been challenging. We're trying to change a social norm.
Right.
And in some communities, like our own, that would be unacceptable. A 30-year-old man knocking on the door to say, I want to date your 16-year-old daughter. You get a kick on his backside. We wouldn't stand for that. But in other communities, it's a real problem. So what we're talking about is not just education. What we're talking about is we're trying to change the way our society looks at the problem and deals with it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you raised the last point. So I was curious about the data on transmission among the Indo-South African community. Can you please comment?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I just want to check if Croatia wants to comment as well. Croatia, I'll just start the answer and you can add. So we look at HIV prevalence by the different race groups, and we do that largely through pregnant rates in pregnant women, and we look at it in blood donors. And the rates in the African community is substantially higher than what we see in the Indian community or in the white community. So how much higher is it? In the Indian community, we don't have this problem of the high rates in young girls. The problem is different. What we see in the Indian community is we see the challenge in high risk groups, or what we call, in the hotspots. So we see it in the gay community, we see it in the sex workers populations, and in the general population, it's quite a low rate. So it's a slightly different epidemic. It's the same virus, but it's a different epidemic from the one we see in the African community. Krisha, do you want to comment on that?
I think you've covered it well. Just greetings, everyone, and wonderful to join you all and to have this opportunity to share our research. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Abdul Karim. Let me ask you, as a woman, from your perspective, how many women, Indo-South African women, are actually transmitting this virus to their unborn babies?
Right. So that's a very good question. When you have sexual transmission of HIV, and particularly in young women in the reproductive age group, you have a concomitant epidemic of transmission to unborn infants from pregnant women. And we, as Slim just described, in the Indian community, there's not a large an epidemic as we see in the indigenous populations. And the transmission rates, if you ask this question about 25 years ago, was very high. From infected mothers to infants, it was about 30 to 40%. But since the early 2000s, there have been a number of interventions that are in place for pregnant women and also for breastfeeding women that has brought the rates down to less than 2%. And we continue to work at the possibility of eradicating mother-to-child transmission of HIV. And I think that's one of our big success stories in our response to HIV globally, in how the scientific evidence is being used, implemented as policy and programs to bring this transmission rate down. And now we have large cohorts of children who are growing up without HIV and reaching adolescence or being able to access treatment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the tenofovir gel, is it the very same gel that can be used across the age groups? And what is the effect of that gel?
The gel can be used by women of any age, but the gel itself is not available. We haven't marketed it or developed it as a product yet because the tenofovir in the tablets has exactly the same effect. So there's no need for the gel because the tablets do the trick just as well. And the tablets are far cheaper to manufacture than the gel is. So that's why we only promote the tablets. The tablets are used now and are licensed for pre-exposure prophylaxis in about 120 countries across the world. So it's very widespread. In South Africa itself, it's estimated that there's probably in the region of about 1.5 million people on pre-exposure prophylaxis who have at least initiated pre-exposure prophylaxis. So it's quite a high rate. And just to round off Croatia's numbers, so if you want to get some idea what the rates are in reproductive age Indian women in South Africa, it's in the region of around 1%. So about 1% of young Indian women of reproductive age have HIV, and the risk of transmitting it to their unborn children is very low. As you heard, it's below 2% at this point. So it's 1 out of 100 have it, and the chances that their children have is less than 2 in 100. So it's quite a small proportion. And perhaps might be worth saying for those who don't know our organization, CAPRISA, our research center, is 81% women. Women run this organization from top to bottom. So even at its leadership level, of the 4 executives, 3 of them are women. We have whole departments that have no men. So it's predominantly a women-run organization. If you leave out our drivers and the IT department, we're 97% women, giving you just some idea of how dominated it is by women.
I want to thank you very much for saying that. And I also want to extend gratitude to the woman who was responsible for connecting us, and that is Dr. Kogi Archery. Thank you all very much. Your work really deserves high commendation, and I look forward to meeting with you all in Durban in August. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to move on now to our second speaker, and I'm going to ask that Professor Amina Jindani speak now, because her work is closely related to the work of our speaker just now, Professor Salim Abdul Karim, and his lovely wife, Quraisha Abdul Karim. Professor Amina Jindani is currently in England, but she's originally from Zanzibar. She has been involved in clinical trials on tuberculosis since the 1960s, when she coordinated the first East African British Medical Research Council trial on short course chemotherapy in Africa. It's such a pleasure to have you, Professor Jindani. Can you unmute your mic, please? Yes.
Thank you so much for inviting me. You know, every Sunday evening, my husband disappeared from the sitting room and until about 9:30 while I was watching Silent Witness, and I wondered where he went. Now I know. Thank you so much for the honor of letting me speak about my work to this audience. May I have the first slide, please? The first slide. Sorry, the first slide. Sorry. Sorry. Can I have the second slide? As Shalima said, I think there's an echo here.
Yes, there's an echo. MK,
Yes.
everybody knows Dr. Mohammed Keshavji on the program now. Dr. Mohammed Keshavji is the husband of Professor Jindani, and I think his mic is unmuted. So that's perhaps where the echo is coming from.
He has to take his volume down.
Okay, his mic is now muted, so that should be fine. Go ahead, please, Professor Jindani.
Okay, so I'm the youngest of 6 daughters, born in Zanzibar. By the time I arrived, my mother was not impressed, but I'm happy to tell you my brother was born after me. Next slide, please. My father looked after the estates of Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah Aga Khan in Zanzibar, and when he visited, he came home for an update on us girls. And at one stage, my mother said to him that she is doing well at school. That's me. I'm doing well at school. So he said, Usko doctor banao. Next slide, please. So since that was the Imam's suggestion, there was no deviating from it. But in those days, to get into medical school, I needed Latin. So eventually I found myself sent to a very posh boarding school in Sussex. Next slide, please. Amongst about 200 very posh English girls. Next slide, please. They played lacrosse. Next slide, please. And the cricket team could knock spots off the Aussies anytime. Next slide, please. I eventually became a prefect. Next slide, please. And learned Latin. Now, those of you who learned Latin will know that the smallest muscle in the body has the longest name. Levator labii superioris aliquo nasi.
The nose.
That's right. This came in very useful to a doctor serving in a platoon when his commanding officer asked him to say grace in Latin. He didn't know any Latin, but he was hit by a lightning flash. So he got up and he said, Levator labii superiores aliquo nasi, amen. And everybody said amen, and they sat down. Next slide, please. Eventually, I became a licentiate of the Royal College of Surgeons and a bachelor of the University of London. At this point, I decided to take a gap year and I went to Jamaica. I contracted a year at the University of West Indies at Mona, where I did pediatrics and got my diploma in pediatrics and dermatology as well. So I know a little bit about some of your part of the world. Next slide, please. But eventually I found myself back in Africa and sent down to the hospital in Nairobi, which treated tuberculosis and leprosy. And these were the sites that I met there. Now, I thought tuberculosis was curable. People say to me, but we've got rid of it. No, we haven't got rid of it. These are the sites we see in a disease that is curable. And as you saw from Professor Karim's slides, it is the biggest killer in HIV-infected patients. So, next slide, please. And looking at the literature, I looked into this, and you will see that it is mentioned in the Old Testament, in the Torah, that the Lord will strike you with consumption, fever, and inflammation if you so deserve. Next slide, please. But apparently it was easy to treat because every Easter Sunday, the king would come and lay his hands on those with tuberculosis. Of the skin, it was called scrofula, of the lymph glands, called scrofula. History doesn't relate whether the king cured them, but that was the practice at that time. So I decided I would make it my life's work to eliminate this curable disease globally. The problem was that the vaccine that we have is not effective and the treatment is too long. So I undertook a series of clinical trials to see if I could reduce the treatment duration, which, next slide, please. This is the annual global report, which says, next slide, please. TB ranks as a leading cause of death worldwide. Estimated 4.3 million are undiagnosed, and TB kills nearly 2 million people, a quarter of which are children. And do not forget that this is a curable disease. Next slide, please. The TB epidemic, the WHO said, is larger than previously estimated. 8 countries accounted for 60% of the new cases: India, Indonesia, China, Nigeria, Pakistan, South Africa, and the Philippines and Bangladesh. People living with HIV accounted in 2018 for 1.2 million, 11% of all new TB cases. Next slide, please. And as you can see, annually, the figures haven't changed from the last 20 years. They remain at an estimated annual incidence of 10 million new cases. Next slide, please. Keep going. Keep going. So this was the first short course trial I undertook with the Medical Research Council. And as you can see, keep going. The treatment at that time was 18 months. That's 2 months of streptomycin, thiacetazone, isoniazid, followed by 16 months of thiacetazone, isoniazid. When 2 new drugs, that is pyrazinamide and rifampicin, became available, we got the relapse rate down to 3%. Now, the original relapse rate was 3%, but that was with an 18-month duration treatment. And now here is a 6-month regimen giving the same relapse rate. This was really very, very encouraging for all of us. Next slide, please. The trouble with, so I undertook a series of clinical trials to continue to reduce the treatment duration. The trouble with clinical trials is, for one trial, you can see the number of ethics committees I had to pass in order to get permission to do the trial. South Africa was easily the worst. Next slide, please. In one country, I was told, it is a GCP requirement that clinical trials must be carried out under conditions which ensure adequate safety for the subjects. Well, none of us can dispute with that. Next slide, please. But the letter goes on to say, the area approximately 3 meters from the clinic building needs to be clear to avoid harboring snakes and rodents. Now, this country wanted me to mow their lawns as well as do my clinical trials. And these are the difficulties I face, those of us who are doing clinical trials, to bring in these irrelevant things and makes it very difficult. Can I have the next slide, please? There are a whole lot of new drugs in the pipeline, but clinical trials are taking longer and costing more. The competition for patients is heating up. The time to develop a new drug in 1960 was 8 years. In 1990, that had doubled. And the cost of a phase 3 clinical trial is anything from 4 million to 20 million US dollars. Like Professor Karim, our funds have been cut by federal funds and British government ODA funds, and it is harder and harder to get money to do clinical trials. Next slide, please. But in the course of my work, I meet some really dedicated, wonderful people. And here is the team in Conakry. Next slide. In Zimbabwe, Harare. Next slide. In Lahore. Next one. In Tianjin, China, I was garlanded. Next slide. In Maputo, Mozambique, this is the team. Next slide. In Kathmandu, again, a fantastically wonderful team, really committed. Next slide. And in Madhya Pradesh, India. So there are many, many places I go to do my clinical trials, and I meet wonderful people dedicated to eradicating this curable disease. Next slide, please. I get to lecture them on the procedures of the trial. Next slide. And I get to talk to the patients to tell them the details of the trial and ask them if they would like to participate or not. Next slide. And here in Zhangjiao, I'm at the home of a patient who was so pleased with her participation in the trial. She told me she would encourage all her friends who got tuberculosis to enter such a trial. Next slide, please. The same with this patient in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Next one, please. And along the way, I've collected some awards. Next one. And this is the Japan Anti-Tuberculosis Association. Next one. But lacking funds, I also registered my own charity. It's called World Without TB. And at that, I find myself wanting to stand at Tooting Broadway Station with a tin in my hand, but I don't do so badly. Next slide. I get volunteers to run in the London Marathon. Next slide. Another volunteer in London Marathon 2015. And also some of my PIs run in the London Marathon as well to collect funds for World Without TB. Next slide, please. With those funds, I can help the laboratories out. Here we are donating a refrigerated centrifuge to the laboratory at Conakry, Guinea. Next one. And here I'm donating a gene expert machine to the laboratory at Lima in Peru. Next slide, please. However, if we don't move fast, you can see that 10.4 million people become sick with TBH, but the treatment given is in the palm of the hands of the patient. Should that patient get MDR TB, you can see how the treatment, the pill burden increases in the palm of that patient. And when they get XDR TB, the survival is only 28%, and the pill burden includes an injection. Next slide, please. Moreover, the cost of treating a drug-susceptible TB is about $250, which goes up 3 times if they have MDR TB, and if they get XDR TB, then I don't think any country in the world can afford to treat these patients. Next slide, please. The latest trial I published in the New England Journal of Medicine showed that with 4 months of treatment was not as effective as the control regimen of 6 months, but really it wasn't bad. It's nearly 90% effective. And my PIs are begging me to roll it out, but it's not for me to roll it out. So now I'm planning, next slide, please, a 3-month trial to see if I can reduce the treatment duration to 3 months if we don't move fast on this, it will be sorry for those patients who we can't cure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I highly commend your work, and I'm sure many members of the audience do as well. Thank you so much for all that you are doing. Ladies and gentlemen, let me invite you to please raise your electronic hands if you have a question or would like to make a comment. Meanwhile, I'm curious, can you please explain the relationship between HIV and tuberculosis?
Well, Professor Karim can tell you, but it's to do with the breakdown in the immune system. These are patients with latent TB. That is, we're all infected with TB, all of us. But should our immune system break down due to HIV virus, we're going to get tuberculosis. And the highest cause of mortality among HIV-infected patients is tuberculosis.
I see. So that is a cause for great concern. Now, given the high cost of the clinical trials, given all the challenges that you've been facing, is there a potential for treatments under Ayush? Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha?
No. Well, there might be. I mean, again, one would have to do a clinical trial. And you see, again, Professor Karim's media exposure is opposite to tuberculosis exposure to the media. They're just not interested in tuberculosis. So we don't get anything like the exposure, and the disease is highly prevalent, sadly curable, but we don't have the media coverage that Professor Karim has.
See, Dr. Mahabir has a question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amina, for excellent presentation, and your work is admirable. I have a very elementary question. This TB is a contagious disease. How do health workers protect themselves working in such a high-risk environment?
They can't. I mean, unless they wear masks. Dr. Mahabir, imagine a mud hut in Africa with no ventilation, grandma sitting in the corner coughing up TB, and the entire extended family around her. They're bound to get infected. So the closer you are, the more likely you are to get infected. Luckily, the staff treating TB patients take precautions, and so they escape the infection.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Let's have Professor Karim come in here. Professor Karim, can you make any suggestions as to how Professor Jindani might be able to get some assistance?
Well, in the world of clinical trials, we're talking about very high costs. And generally, those costs are met by pharmaceutical companies that are developing the drug. So they would see eventual profits as their motive for paying upfront for these trials. The challenge in tuberculosis and in some of the other diseases where you're not dealing with a new drug, so it's not a pharmaceutical company involved, then you have to depend on the Wellcome Trust, on the Gates Foundation, on the National Institutes of Health. And in those instances, you have to write competitive grants, as we do.
I see.
Sadly, the Wellcome Trust is no longer funding TB clinical trials. Neither is the Gates Foundation and the British Medical Research Council. The WHO tells us we have a perfectly effective 6-month regimen. Use it.
Quite unfortunate. We have to try to figure out some way to get some assistance.
If I could do this 3-month trial and show it to be effective, it would be a turning point in the incidence of tuberculosis and in the cure rates, because it would improve compliance and increase cure rates as well.
Well, we wish you all the best with that effort. Dr. Betty Govindan is saying, yes, TB is also linked to socioeconomic conditions. How can governments do more under departments of health, I believe? Let me just double check that.
Health, yes.
Health, yes. Can you please respond to that? How can governments do more under departments of health?
Governments are, in fact, presently cutting funding for TB research. As you know, the USAID have sent all their people home, just like that. People have had to stop mid-trial, and our British government also is going to spend more on defense and less on research, and particularly in tuberculosis. Besides, tuberculosis is the archetypal poverty-related disease. And unless something is done about poverty, nothing will be done about TB.
You stumped me there. You stumped me, you really have. There are so many challenges that we are facing globally, and then geopolitics is not helping in any way. Jay Nair has a question. Go ahead, Jay. Please unmute. Go ahead.
Just a comment and a question. Real commendable work by Dr. Jindani and Dr. Karim and his lovely wife. There are many problems in the world at the moment which was started by the guy down south from us. And I don't want to mention any names at this point in time because it's a little questionable. If that aid doesn't come from the US, where else can aid come from? Charities? But even the charities are scared because of what this guy is doing. So having said that, what can we as part of the ICC around the world in the Indian diaspora, what can we do to project or to educate our membership as to how to help your organizations?
Can I make a comment? I spoke about my charity registered in the United Kingdom called World Without TB. Now, we tried to register World Without TB in South Africa. And we were told we had to go through something called the Master's Office. Now, apparently, after 5 years of trying, we were told questions were asked in the South African Parliament about the state of the Master's Office, which apparently were completely dissipated. And so we could not register this charity in South Africa. There are many, many people in South Africa who were willing to help, but they wanted tax relief. And I could only get tax relief if I could register this charity in South Africa. Believe me, I tried for many years, but I was completely stumped by something called the Master's Office. Now, Mr. Nair, if you can make contact with them and ask them to register my charity.
Dr. Karim, you are here.
It's falling right back on the shoulders of Professor Abdul Karim.
I'm coming.
No, I think there are challenges at the Master's Office, and there's a level of dysfunction. But I think that shouldn't stop you, Dr. Janani. I think the opportunities to work with many of the local TB organizations and to raise funds through them. In other words, let them be your local recipient on your behalf. And I'm sure many of them will be willing to do so. FOSA is a classic example of that.
Yeah.
They're friends of the Sikh Association. They raise substantial amounts of money and they disperse it to programs and activities that focus on TB control.
Thank you very much for that.
Mm.
Professor Jindani, would you like to comment?
No, I'm grateful for that. If you could put me in touch with this organization, I would happily write to them and ask for help.
Terrific. So we don't mind assisting in whatever way we can to have that connection made. Thank you very much. So we will put you together and see how this thing can be advanced. I want to thank you again, Professor Jindani. You've done such tremendous work, and I want to, I mean, words can't be enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
I'm so glad we were able to feature you and your terrific work on the program. I'd like to move on now to our third speaker, and this is Professor Samuel Ramswak from right here in Trinidad and Tobago. He's a pioneer of advanced reproductive medicine in the Caribbean. He established the region's first fertility and in vitro fertilization clinic and achieved the first successful IVF pregnancy in 1996, such a tremendous assistance to a number of families in Trinidad. Welcome, sir. You can go ahead with your presentation.
Yes, hello everybody, and it's indeed a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the organizers for doing a wonderful job and to allow me to have this short time with your international audience. Let me put on my, right. I think you should be seeing my screen. Shalima?
No, we're not seeing a screen. You have to share it.
Okay, one second.
Open the PowerPoint and share.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, one second.
Right, it's coming up.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so again, I want to say thank you. And you've heard, this is me. I am Professor Emeritus in Reproductive Medicine at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad. And I'm going to be sharing some of my work and speaking about the science and infertility in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. So I grew up in a rural area of Trinidad in the 50s. The area is called Sangre Grande. My father owned a shop which was called Atomic Cafe, and that was named after the atomic bomb that unfortunately devastated Hiroshima and Nagasaki just a few years earlier. My family was composed of 8 siblings, and I was the 5th. I was educated in that same rural area. And in those days, as many people know, the Canadian mission brought a lot of educational opportunities to people, especially those of Indo descent. And I eventually did my first degree in the University of the West Indies, at that time headquartered in Mona, Jamaica, as Professor Jindai indicated. I was also there, and my degree was in 1977. While I was a medical student, I started my first bit of research and published this paper in the Caribbean Medical Journal in 1979. I worked at the hospitals in Port of Spain and in Mount Hope, and then also went ahead and secured fellowships in the UK, in Sheffield and Manchester. But I was very interested in the academic culture of teaching, mentorship, research, clinical service, and I served as dean at the Faculty of Medicine at our university for 8 years. One of the things that struck me as a gynecologist was this particular event in world history, which was the birth of the very first IVF baby in the UK in 1978. Louise Brown is her name, and she was born from a procedure called in vitro fertilization, or IVF. And basically, this procedure allows for eggs to be retrieved from the ovary or the ovaries of a woman, placed in a petri dish in the incubator together with sperms, and allow the fertilization to take place in the incubator. And a few days later, the fertilized egg would be transferred into the uterus of the woman. And this is what a sample of what the pictures look like from a fertilized egg to development of embryos or pre-embryos, and eventually a blastocyst about 5 days later. And then there was another method aligned to this, which came about a few years later, and that was called intracytoplasmic sperm injection. And this was a procedure whereby men with very, very low sperm counts, or those who did not have sperms that were capable of moving effectively, could be injected. So this is a sperm in a needle, and that needle is injecting an egg being held in place by this suction apparatus, and increasing the chance of fertilization success. But this whole procedure was associated with many, many questions. And I was part of a process, I think, that tried to answer some of the questions. At that time, I was working in the UK. For example, this is a pictogram of a method of extracting an egg from an ovary. So there was a system where we used a probe with a needle into the vagina, and that would go be directed by ultrasound guidance into what you call the follicle of the ovary containing the egg, and extracting it. The question is, how would you do that best in terms of ability to make it widely available? Well, one of the questions is, what type of analgesia would you need to do? Would you need to do general anesthesia, or can you try something otherwise? Can you try a local anesthetic, or can you try no anesthesia? Now, bearing in mind that in the time I'm speaking about, which is the early 80s, what happened then was that many centers were just allowing for the development of a single egg, not multiple eggs as we do now. So one of the things that I embarked upon was research into whether we needed analgesia at all for aspirating or removing eggs from a single follicle in the process of in vitro fertilization. And this is one of the processes, Dr. Jindani, you will appreciate that I had a lot of work to do with ethics committees to ensure that we could be allowed to do this without anesthesia. And this was published in the Journal of In Vitro Fertilization and Embryo Transfer at that time. Another concern was, when we do put back in the embryos into the uterus, what about this area of implantation? This is called the endometrium, and that area has to be receptive to putting in an embryo into the woman's uterus. So there were a number of concerns about that quality of the endometrium. And I worked in Sheffield with a tremendous team. Some of these names are indicated here: Professors Lee and Cook and Lenton and so on. And we were able to look at variations in the endometrial response to using hormone replacement therapy to make the endometrial lining as perfect as possible and as receptive as possible to the embryo. And this was published in the British Journal of Obstetrics in those days. This is another similar paper, again, published in the British Journal. And then the journal that is considered the most prestigious journal in fertility in the US is Fertility Sterility. And we worked trying to find methods that could influence fertilization and success in IVF. And this is an example of one of the papers that we would have published in Fertility Sterility. Using the process of inserting sperms into the uterus, a process called intrauterine insemination, there were some challenges using traditional equipment. And this is one of the equipment that we use. It's called a speculum for visualizing the cervix and for allowing us to insert sperms. This was not very effective because of the way the tip was made. And so I was able to work with a company in Sheffield, which is a steel making company. And everybody knows that Sheffield is famous for its steel manufacture. And we were able to produce another variation to this instrument, which was more effective for the purpose of doing insemination of sperm into the uterus. And this was highlighted in a paper that was published just about maybe 2 weeks after I submitted this paper to the journal, British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and this was in 1990. And then in 1996, we were able to bring this technology to Trinidad, and this became the very first IVF pregnancy in the Caribbean. The patient became pregnant in 1996 and delivered in 1997. And this actually is a cartoon that was published in the local newspaper, highlighting this particular development in our country. And we had a team which included persons who worked with me in Trinidad, as well as the two people in the middle are from the UK. The third from the left is Dr. Anju Kumar. She's actually Indian origin, living and working in England. And they all came to Trinidad to help this process work and become successful. So out of that, we had the first IVF pregnancy in the Caribbean, the first ICSI pregnancy. That's where we inject the sperm into the egg. And we had the first frozen embryo pregnancy. And this was published in the West Indian Medical Journal. Our experience over a 5-year period of time was also published in the West Indian Journal. And we started in Trinidad. And 5 years later, they began the same process in Jamaica, and another 5 years after that in Barbados. Another area of interest to me in the field of infertility is that sometimes people get pregnant, but the pregnancy does not implant within the uterine cavity, but rather in the fallopian tube. And this is called an ectopic pregnancy. It is not a pregnancy that is capable of long-term development, as the fallopian tube is a very small structure and is likely to rupture as the pregnancy progresses. And this is a diagram showing this is the uterus, and this is the fallopian tube in which there is a pregnancy, and it is almost ready to rupture. It's a life-threatening condition. But we know that one of the reasons that this happens is because of certain infections that take place in the fallopian tube. And one of these infective organisms is called Chlamydia trachomatis. And what I wanted to do was to find a way to identify whether chlamydia was one of the organisms that caused this. So I collaborated with my colleagues again at the University of Sheffield, and what we tried to do was to identify the organism in tissues obtained from ectopic pregnancies. So essentially, what I wanted to do was to show that this organism actually existed in the tissues. There was initial interest in this, and workers were showing that, yes, you could probably find this organism, but they did not have fresh tissues to locate it in. So what I embarked upon was a series of investigations to obtain fresh tissues from ectopic pregnancies and have them tested by PCR, or polymerase chain reaction. At that time, not as well developed as it is today, but we were able to demonstrate that this organism was indeed present in the fresh tissues of ectopic pregnancies. And this formed the basis of my postgraduate thesis, MD by research at the University of the West Indies. And we were able to publish this in some journals, Sexually Transmitted Infections. I see Professor Salim did also show some of his work in that journal. And in Journal of Medical Microbiology, this is the prevalence of chlamydia in fresh tissue specimens, as I mentioned before. So those are just two areas I would like to highlight of my work in the country of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, I have to pay special tribute to my parents and my wife and daughter. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your family with us, and thank you for sharing your excellent work. Let me just say something about that speculum. Sir, to be perfectly honest with you, I do not know a single woman who has reported a good experience with that speculum. And it's not only used for IVF, it's used for so many other feminine applications. Is there any way that you can revise it again?
That's a very good question, yes. And it had to be a man who developed it.
Yes. Why? Professor Jandani, Professor Quraisha Abdul Karim, please, we need you all to assist in some way.
Yes, I agree. I agree. It's really that in order to get to the cervix, there are very few ways that we can do it. Now, as you know, there are methods of using plasticized instruments. Those are disposable, and that's a possibility. But by and large, I think worldwide, it has been thought to be better to use the steel, stainless steel ones. The plastic ones may sound like a good idea, but they're very noisy, and they sometimes they slip. And actually the experience can be not as pleasant for the patient. So yeah, but I take your point. I get that comment all the time.
Thank you very much. Now about IVF, what is the percentage? I don't know if you have the data, but can you shed light on the extent to which it is actually used by persons of Indian descent as opposed to others?
I think it's worldwide similar. Remember that worldwide you have people who have infertility. WHO in 2023 estimated that 17.5% of the adult population suffered with an ability to have a child. That is 1 in 6 persons. The conditions that may cause this would range from problems with the fallopian tubes. For example, you've heard the term of blockage of the fallopian tubes that would prevent an egg from getting to the sperm within the fallopian tube and implanting into the ovary. So you have tubal blockage. You have issues relating to an ability to produce eggs, ovarian cysts, female age. You have also issues relating to the male factor. And in fact, we know that about 40 to 50% of men are unable to achieve pregnancy. So there's a male factor, which was traditionally not considered to be the case, especially in the Indo type of family structure. Generally, it's always the woman who would have been appropriated the blame. But we now know that it's quite different. So and these things happen everywhere. You might find in certain populations that tubal infection from pelvic inflammatory disease is more common in a certain ethnic group than another one, but that's in particular countries. It's not related to the organisms. It's not related to anything else, but simple epidemiology. So at the end of the day, no, I don't think I can give you a number relating to people of Indian origin at all. We know that everywhere in the world, infertility is a problem. Certainly in India, there are many IVF clinics, many, and they have some of the highest concentration of IVF clinics in India, and it's a major concern with so many people unable to get pregnant. Now, sometimes there are simpler methods of getting pregnant, much simpler, just taking some tablets or doing the right thing at the right time and various things like that. But there are some situations where we don't have an answer except by going to this additional step.
All right. Thank you very much for that clarification. We have a question from Suman Kapoor. Suman, go ahead, please.
Hi, I am from New Zealand, and I experienced that old ectopic pregnancy during 1980. And it is just a small comment that I came to know quite a lot today from your talk, more than what I knew at that time. So by the laser technology in Delhi, my doctor removed it. And this was seen by our lots of medical students in Delhi, which was shown on, I don't remember which technology, but there were many students and one of the rare cases. Hence, the enlightenment, and also like what kind of infection can be there and what caused it. I was not much aware. However, it was treated. But today's talk, Doctor, enlightened me more than anything else. So please take it as a comment, and I will further study your work too. Thank you. This is just life experience.
Thank you very much for your kind words.
I suffered so much pain. I still remember, but I didn't know what it is causing. And thank you to that doctor who was so qualified, and she told me what I didn't know a clue of it, what it is.
Yes. So you would have benefited from a process called laparoscopic surgery.
Yes, laparoscopy.
Yes, and they would have been able to remove the tube through a fine port. Well done. That's excellent.
Yes. And also just a socio-cultural thing added to your research work is that when the doctor asked me whether you or your husband would like to be, because you can't bear more children, but there is technology in future you can. However, by cutting the tube or removing whatever it is, there are more chances. So you or your husband, my husband ran away. He said, no way, you face it. Well, that's the femininity we face. So
Yes.
they had to cut and everything removed.
Thank you.
Just a lighter side. Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Kapoor. Professor Ramsawak, let's talk about a little bit about the price of IVF. In Trinidad and Tobago, we often see advertisements from the Barbados Fertility Clinic. Where can IVF be done in Trinidad and Tobago, and at what cost?
Okay, so let me just say that I have not been involved directly with IVF for a few years now because the clinic has been taken over, and I have basically retired from that kind of work. And therefore I will not be up to date with the prices. But yes, as I mentioned, the other countries in the Caribbean that do IVF would be Jamaica, of course, Barbados, and I think also in the Cayman Islands. I think the prices are going to be very similar. It will be one of the more expensive methods of fertility treatments because of the technology and the specialized drugs and so on. I can't give you a number. I'm sorry, because I'm not directly involved in the day-to-day practice anymore. I still do a practice, but not in the day-to-day IVF anymore.
I understand, but thank you very much for clarifying that it is because of the drugs and the technology that the price is generally very high, almost prohibitive for many families who might want to try it.
Yes. And the thing is, this is a very important socioeconomic consideration. The thing is that it's not likely that in areas of our diaspora that these treatments will be offered in the public sector because of the cost and the outcome that someone is looking for. It's not quite the same as, for example, a treatment of a cancer. And I want to tell you, when I began the whole consideration of developing IVF in Trinidad and Tobago, there was a fair amount of well, not lack of support, let me put it that way, because I was hoping that it would have happened in the public sector. And you need to get the support of the people who would try to determine whether the cost of having a child where would that be in a priority list of the other things, health issues in the country. And as you know, in some parts of the world, you can get IVF on whether the NHS or in the European countries, and many of them are capable of doing that. But that unfortunately doesn't exist in this part of the world.
Well, let's say not yet. Perhaps
Yes.
it is to come.
Thank you. I like that.
Thank you very much for sharing your work, and it's been wonderful having you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had 3 excellent presentations thus far, and we'd like to bring on our 4th presenter now. Dr. Rahana Juman is also from Trinidad, like Professor Ramsawak, but she has conducted research on mangrove forests and seagrass beds for the past 29 years, and is the technical lead for a project piloting a blue carbon credit scheme for Trinidad and Tobago. So we've dealt with a lot of biology in the 3 previous presentations. But if we don't look into what is happening in terms of our climate, all that treatment and so on will be for naught if we lose persons to Mother Nature. So I want to welcome Dr. Juman. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Hey, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I must say I'm very honored to be among this group of renowned medical scientists, and I'm changing it up a little bit from human health to environmental health, which also impacts on human health.
Correct. Dr. Juman, we're having a little difficulty hearing you. Would you mind speaking a little louder, please?
Sure. Thank you. So I'm just going to share the work that we're doing here in Trinidad and in the Caribbean, as well as some of the other small island developing states internationally.
Dr. Juman, I hate to interrupt you, but your voice is really inaudible to us.
Oh, that's true.
Does you have a headphone that you
Is
can
there any
use?
device connected to your computer?
No.
Because your voice, okay, she might just have to speak louder.
Okay. Are you hearing me any better now?
probably come closer to the
We're hearing, sorry, Navin?
You might just need to come closer to the laptop or the
Okay.
computer.
Is it any better?
It's slightly better, but it's not quite as clear as the other three presenters.
Okay, I don't know because it was working good all the time. I'm sorry about this.
Okay. Well, we'll have to work with
Try
this.
to- Okay, I'll
Just
try
speak
to
louder.
Yes, I'll just try to speak louder.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to give you a little snapshot of the research I've been conducting here in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean and what we have been doing globally as small island developing states. So I work for the government of Trinidad. I work for an institute called the Institute of Marine Affairs, which is the only multidisciplinary marine and environmental research organization in the CARICOM state, amongst CARICOM states. And basically, we have been set up by the we're a government-funded institution, and we are set up to do research on the coastal and the marine environment so that we could advise government on the sustainable management of these important natural resources. So our mandate is not only research, but it's about providing advice, but also too in terms of public education and outreach. So I'm changing my slide now, and I'm having problems now. Is it changing on your side?
No, it's
No.
not. You want to try again?
It was changing earlier on. Okay, okay.
Yes, now it's changed.
So just for those who don't know, Trinidad and Tobago is located in the Caribbean. It's the most southern islands of the Caribbean, and it's just about 7 miles off of Venezuela, the South American mainland, where we're just over 5,000 square kilometers of land, 704 kilometers coastline, just over 77,500 kilometers of water. Basically, we have more sea under our jurisdiction than land. So it's a ratio of 1 to 15. So this kind of gives you an idea of how important our marine environment is to us. So we're heavily dependent on resources within our coastal zone for socioeconomic well-being. We're highly industrialized. We're an oil and gas producing country, and we also one of the largest producers of internationally of ammonia and urea. In addition to the small island Tobago, tourism is big as well as fishing. In 2015, 81% of our GDP actually came from all our activities within our coastal zone, and within our island, 70% of our population and 80% of all economic activities are concentrated along the coast, including some of our most important infrastructure. Lots of our roads and bridges are also coastal, and that's why we are so vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and therefore we have to be able to adapt. So being in the tropics, we're blessed with a number of coastal ecosystems, rocky shores, sandy beach, coastal thicket, mangrove forests, seagrass beds, and coral reef. And I'm just going to focus on two in particular, which is the mangrove forest and the seagrass beds. Now, in terms of mangrove forests, mangroves are plants that grow in the intertidal between the high and the low tide. So they could grow in flooded environments, and they can grow in salty environments. Unlike other plants, you know, they outcompete the other plants. And where they're located, they provide critical ecosystem services for everyone. And globally, they contribute an estimated US $42 billion to global fisheries, over storing 25 million tons of carbon per year. And carbon, as you know, is the greenhouse gas responsible for climate change. And they also provide flood protection for over 15 million people. So they have a role not only in terms of climate mitigation by sequestering and storing carbon dioxide, but they also have a role in terms of climate adaptation, providing coastal protection against coastal erosion, storms, and coastal flooding. In Trinidad, we have a map here on this side, and it just gives an idea of where our mangroves are located. And by we have how they have changed over the years. But by 1994, we would have already lost more than 50% of our mangrove forests nationally. And that's because, mangrove exists in what we call high price coastal real estate. And a lot of our mangrove forests have been cleared to build houses, to build roads, to build industry, as well as ports, as well as to expand our capital city of Port of Spain. So we have lost, and in Tobago similarly for hotel construction. So we have lost a lot of our mangroves, and now we have to protect what we currently have, even though they're also very much degraded. So in terms of the research that we do, we look at how the wetland has changed. So the Caroni Swamp is located along the Trinidad West Coast, and it's our largest mangrove forest. And during when we were still a colony, the wetland would have been manipulated or interfered with to create land, to keep out salt water and create fresh areas for fresh water so that there could have been rice cultivation. And the brown here shows the rice cultivation that would have occurred in 1942. However, a lot of the infrastructure we put in, the embankments and the sluice gates and so forth, are not maintained. So over time, and we alter how much fresh water we allow out of the flowing in from the land, and with sea level rise, we have salt water coming in. So we've had mangrove basically extending further inland. And from the maps, you would also see the construction of our major highways. This is the Church of Roosevelt Highway and the Uriah Buzz Butler Highway. And these are highways that run through our wetland. And over time, you would see how our wetland, the red is build development, and that has increased. So we've had more people impacted negatively on the wetland, and our job is to do the research to look at the impacts and then advise on management, especially since this wetland in particular is a very popular ecotourism site. It is the home of our national bird, the scarlet ibis, which is an environmentally sensitive species, and we have to protect the habitat in order to protect this species. We also have a lot of folks that earn livelihoods through crab catching, oyster harvesting, fishing, and so forth. So their livelihood is dependent on these wetlands, and therefore for the need to conserve. We also do research in terms of projected sea level rise with the different scenario of climate change to look at how these systems are going to change in time, and therefore how we need to either adapt or what kind of intervention we can make to preserve some of these wetlands into the future. Another particular wetland that is important, especially for Indo-Caribbean, Indo-Trinidadians, is the Gordino wetland, which sits at the hydrological endpoint of the South Oropouche River Basin. So here, this is where it's located. The green is the actual wetland, and this area here is the catchment, that everything that happens in the catchment flows through this wetland into the ocean, the Gulf of Paria. Now, this particular wetland, within this river basin, after indentureship came to an end, folks were given parcels of land in this area for agricultural purposes. Also, too, the first oil well that was drilled in the 1900s was drilled within this area. So this is another area that has been changed over time, a wetland, to facilitate oil exploration. So again, they put in a lot of infrastructure to keep out salt water so it wouldn't corrode pipelines and so forth. And with that, there came an opportunity for rice cultivation. So there was a lot of rice, again, planted in this area. But over time, the infrastructure fell apart and salt water came in, and we had to move away from rice cultivation to other short crops. So this area is very important agricultural area for many, especially in the Indo-Trinidadian community. But within recent times, this area has been subjected to annual flooding, right? Due to climate change impacts, high intense rainfall. And we have just received, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has just received, well, just a couple of years ago, received funds from the Climate Adaptation Fund to basically build an adaptation or to build resilience to this community. And because wetlands play such an important role in flood mitigation, in holding flood water, and in coastal protection, the attempt is to what we call use nature-based solution, use the wetland as a nature-based solution to help to address some of the flooding that takes place within this river basin. The other thing, as I mentioned before, mangrove forests in particular, in recent times we have learned about what we call blue carbon. Blue carbon is carbon that is stored in marine ecosystems, particularly mangrove forests and seagrass beds. So in our mangrove forests, we have a lot of carbon that is sequestered and stored not only in the plant biomass, but also in the soil. And what we have been doing recently is quantifying the amount that's actually stored there, because we could monetize that and participate in what we call carbon credit schemes, where we get funds to keep those carbon sinks, to maintain those carbon sinks. And the intent is to be engaged in these carbon credit schemes so we could get the funding that would benefit the communities that depend on the wetland, but also help with the conservation of the wetland. But before you could participate, of course, you have to have a rigid data set. So we're in the process of collecting a lot of that data and setting up what we call MRV system. That's for monitoring, reporting, and verification in order to be able to be accredited to some of these schemes. Again, a way of monetizing these mangroves and to help in their conservation. We do the same thing with the seagrass beds. Seagrasses are another ecosystem that exists. Grasses that grow on our seafloor and shallow areas. And because they exist in shallow areas along the coast, we have lost most of our seagrass beds in Trinidad and Tobago. The one of the existing is within a marine protected area in Tobago. So again, we are trying to accurately map and quantify the amount of carbon in these ecosystems, noting that a large percentage of it is actually below ground. We have seen how human impacts, stuff like impacts from pollution, land-based sources of pollution, has led to the degradation of these ecosystems. And now we're trying to find ways to mitigate. As mentioned, a lot of the mangrove that we currently have are also very degraded, and we're in the process of doing mangrove rehabilitation projects, which is not simply going out and planting mangroves, and we've learned that internationally from shared experiences, but understanding why the mangrove died in the first place and trying to remove some of those stresses. And a lot of these stresses have to do with the hydrological conditions, how water flow in and out of that wetland. And if we could reestablish the natural water flow, there might be better potential of natural regeneration. But we do encourage some replanting to speeden the process, but also it's an opportunity to get communities engaged. Internationally, we have learned that restoration projects are only successful when you engage with the coastal communities and they become part of the process. This picture here is actually a restoration project that was being done in Sri Lanka that we were able to visit to see what was being done in that country. Similarly, we are attempting seagrass restoration using different methods, sexual, asexual, and even trying to grow it outside in labs and then transplant it into the natural environment. Because again, we have to rehabilitate these degraded ecosystems because of all the services they provide to us. And of course, all of our science is of no value unless it's translated and it's utilized by the folks that is most impacted by it, which are the coastal community, the resource users. So part of it is publishing our information as well as informing policy. So one of the policy I've been very much involved in is the integrated coastal zone management policy, which focus on building adaptation to climate change. As well as right now we're developing another policy on the sagassa, which is a brown algae that has been coming up on our shoreline since 2011 in large quantities and impacting on people, their livelihoods, and even their health. So we're trying to see how we could best address that. And then most importantly, again, public education and outreach. through schools, communities, children at all different ages, coastal communities, resource users, the fisher folks, the tour operators, but also important is educating the policymakers and the politician. Many times we think we don't need to educate them, but they're the ones that make the decision for today. And a lot of the action needs to be done now. One of the picture here is with the couple of years ago, we had the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Dame Patricia Scotland, visit Trinidad and Tobago, and we took her into the Caroni Swamp because we wanted her to get a first-hand experience of our wetland and how valuable the wetland are to people within our country. And with that, I say thank you very much. I hope people were able to hear me. Thank you.
Dr. Juman, I want to thank you very much for the good work too that you are doing. This is fantastic. I mean, we've had biology, you're into environmental science, and you're doing such fantastic work for us. In Trinidad and Tobago, what are some of the challenges that you, as a woman of Indian heritage, face in your field?
So, going to university, if you go to the University of the West Indies, you would see a lot of women, a lot of Indian women at the university, and you would find a lot of Indian women in the scientific fields. But sometimes you get a lot of challenges because I think even in the public sector, it's still very much male dominated, and you get that there's so much you can do, but there's still a lot of what they call the glass ceiling that you have to raise. So you still get a lot of pushback. I remember when I first started and I started to attend meetings, I was younger than most of the folks, and they would treat me like their little child. And so you have to work harder to get respect for people to take you seriously, I think, as a woman.
That's true. In our patriarchal society, still patriarchal, I think, among the Indo population, how has your family reacted to the field that you wanted to get into, or the work that you are currently doing?
Well, I came from a family, I'm the first in my family to get a university education. My dad, he worked hard so I could start, and I guess everybody after me followed. He didn't understand what I was doing. I remember as when I first started, he said, but if you wanted to work in a mangrove, I couldn't take you there. I used to go and catch crab, is that, and he would tell people that I was cleaning the mangroves. And I had to explain to him, no, Daddy, I'm not cleaning, I'm actually doing research, so it was, it was hard at first because also too, when you go to work in this environment, sometimes you sink up to your chest in mud and it's kind of dangerous. So, it was a little difficult at first, but I think they have been very, very supportive of me, throughout my career. So, yeah.
Terrific. So among the crowd, I'm not seeing any raised hands, and members of the audience, please feel free to raise your electronic hand if you do have a question for Dr. Juman. We would love to have some questions. This is a unique field that she's engaged in, and she's done remarkably well. Jay, I see your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Well, commendable work for a female in a patriarchal society. I know the feeling we have that in Canada, the same thing. We broke the glass ceiling in a lot of places, and we've got a lot of women that show the way, and the male partners or friends follow as in the tail. We've got leaders all over. So the question, how much of your work is being presented into the education field? Especially with the school-going kids starting at very early age to talk about the environment, actually presenting them to the environment and ask them how they can, protect that for their future. It's not for our future.
Yeah.
It's what impact. I know it's tough to get into the male-dominated parliament, but going through women in the movement.
So with regards, public education is critical. We spend a lot of time with school outreach in particular. And that's why it's important for us to, like, most of the books that I've published have been provided to schools free of charge, all the secondary and primary schools. We go in and we do lectures as well. We have events. We bring children to the lab to teach them about science. Unfortunately, we can't take them into the environment. It's against the school rules to take them. You know, you would have to get the parents sign permission and so forth.
Right.
You know, but we try to take the environment to them in the schools, show them films, get them engaged in things like competitions, art, culture, how they could see how they reflect what they understand in art or sound or whatever. And it's something that we focus a lot on, especially now when we're doing mangrove restoration projects. We try to engage as much as possible with not only the schools, but the communities that live and work within the mangrove, the ones who catch the crab, the folks that take the oysters, you know, so that they're better educated, they're better aware, and they become stewards, good stewards, so that they could protect the environment, because we're not going to be out there all the time. They are out there. They would be the ones to see when something is happening, so they'll be able to report it to us and we can go out and assist in any way. So yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Excellent work.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic, Dr. Juma, and we can't thank you enough for what you are doing. And we look forward to seeing better results for you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I want to say thank you very much to our 4 presenters today. You've really honored us with your presence, and you've also honored us with the work that you all are doing, all 4 of you. Thank you. At this point in time, I'd like to have a few minutes to share with you a conference that we are hosting in South Africa in August. So I'm going to ask the chair of the local organizing committee, Dr. Kogi Archery, to share some information with you. We're going to have a conference. Shakira will please assist with some slides that Kogi has organized. And Kogi, would you mind unmuting your mic, please?
Okay, can you hear me now, Shalima?
We are. Go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, good. All right. Good evening, everybody. It is 7 minutes to 11 here in South Africa, but don't stress, I'm wide awake and ready to do this presentation. So basically, we have these 3 3 parties that are organizing the tour, which is the Verulam 1860 Indentured Laborers Foundation in Verulam, as well as the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center based in Trinidad and Tobago, and the local organizing committee in South Africa, of which I'm the chairperson. The conference and the tour dates are from the 3rd to the 12th of August, 2025. The conference itself is 3 days, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th, and we have at least 40 speakers. From the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, 9th, 10th, and the 11th and 12th, we've got 7 days of tour of province of KwaZulu-Natal. We are going to go to Potchefstroom, we're going to go to Howick, and a few other places as well. So I've now moved on to slide 2, and this talks about what the event is all about, and it is the commemoration of the 165th anniversary of Indian indentured laborers to South Africa. We still have space, we still have place, and you're all most welcome to contact me should you want to be a part of this tour. Next slide, Shakira.
That will be attendance at both the conference and the tour, Kogi.
Yes, correct. This slide shows you where we're going to be staying, and we're going to be staying at the AHA Gateway Hotel. And the conference is at the Alpwest Institute for Future Tech, which is based in Gateway. And from the slide, you can see it's a 5-minute walk from the hotel that we have secured at extremely great rates. So it's a 5-minute walking distance with all amenities, everything provided. So this is where the conference is going to be held, which is the Alpwest Institute for Future Tech. Next slide, please. Right, so about the accommodation, we're going to be staying at the Gateway Hotel. A block booking has been secured for the conference. If you are booking with us, the reference number will be provided to you. Extremely great prices, right? A standard room is 1,750 rand, and you can do the calculation. At the moment, I think it's 18 rand to one US dollar, right? So we also have a superior room, and then we have a single occupancy as well, which is 1,550 rand. So there is some other information on the slides, but I'm not going to go through it. But we have catered for the community at large and all other sectors. For if you are a Muslim person and you're looking at halal means, we do have a supplier for that. Next slide, please. I know I've only been given a few minutes because we normally close at 11. Okay, and there are the services here which are available and which you might need to know. We also have a logistics document in place, which Shalima can share with you if you need that information. But basically, this is just a quick rundown of what we have already planned and prepared for those of you that are keen to come to South Africa and would like to make a booking for this conference and tour. Thank you, Shalima. I can take questions now.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from members of the audience? I think most persons who are generally with us have a lot of information about this tour. It's only if it is that it's basically somebody who's never been on the program before who would like to know a little bit more. So we are just sharing additional information because some persons may have either not yet booked or would like to book because their circumstances now allow them to be able to do so. So I am seeing a question from Mr. Satyadat. Let me just check that. Can you please share your PowerPoint and email address to satyadat@hotmail.com? Will do, no problem. And we've been circulating some information as well as 2 links so that as long as you've already booked your flight or your abstract has been selected and you are in fact due to present your paper at the conference, we would like you to please complete that additional registration so that we can get our final numbers in order to prepare for you. Kogi and Kogi and the local organizing committee are doing a fantastic job. They're at it almost every day. Thank you very much, Kogi. They're at it every day trying to put things in place so that everyone will have a good experience there in South Africa. Ramesh, you have a question. Go ahead, please. You need to unmute your mic.
I think
And I just want to remind everyone, including Ramesh, who has already booked his flight, already paid for the conference attendance and so on. If it is that you have specific questions that can be answered, you have our WhatsApp number, you have our email addresses. Please feel free to use those as well and to mention it to the others who you know have booked. Additionally, we will be having a special Zoom meeting for all participants who are confirmed to be attending. So even if it is that you don't get all the information that you require at the moment, please understand it is indeed forthcoming. Ramesh, you are not unmuting. Please do so.
He has to unmute.
So it's Mr. and Mrs. Ram Logan that have booked to come to South Africa. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm seeing his hand up, but nothing, no sound. Ramesh, you can always connect with us. You have our numbers and so on. So Kogi, thanks very much for bringing up the hotel. And next week, we will talk a little bit about the conference and what is to be expected there at the venue. Yeah? Anything else you want to add?
Just looking forward to seeing everybody. You know, we meet up on via Zoom for the last 4 or 5 years. Shalima, when was your first presentation? I'm sure you're not going to forget your first the first day that
5 years. 5 years.
I was presenting. I was a presenter before I officially became a moderator. So it's 2 things to measure.
And both great. Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing, and even our.
We hope Professor Salim and Karisha.
Yes.
would join us. Is
Yeah.
it possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll make
Miriam, we're
contact with
also
them again.
looking forward. Yeah.
Yes, that's the
Miriam
plan.
Natalwala, thank you very much.
Kogi,
Yes.
did
Hi.
you invite Krisen?
When
Dr.
you say
Krisen, Dr. Krisen Naika.
we sent out invitations to everybody, the team, the entire team, the secretary, the conference
I don't
convener.
recall
I
seeing that
personally
name.
can't.
I don't recall
Yeah.
seeing that name in the initial registration forms.
But we still could. They
Mhm.
send an invitation to attend our conference and the tours.
Mhm.
We could do that. Yeah, but I personally don't recall sending him. But
Mhm.
I'm not sure if Betty Govenden did, but we will check on that name and yeah.
Jay, you can
And you-
always connect with that
Yeah.
person as well, and please let us know if they need a registration link.
I mentioned them, but official invitation should come from the LOC.
Well, we
Okay.
do have
Mhm.
letters that we can send out, but we just need the names and email addresses. So Jay, I will contact you tomorrow, and then you can send me his Creason's email address,
Right.
and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Terrific. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fantastic evening, so very enlightening. And at this point in time, I want to turn you all over to Shakira. Thanks again.
Thank you, Shalama. And we want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend and to participate. It has truly been a really significant program today. And like today, we often partner with the Amina Ghafoor Institute for the Study of Indentureship and its Legacies, led by Professor David Dean. So you can feel free to contact the ICC to publish your books. And remember that we are kindly asking for suggestions. And if you give your donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials. Please contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for details. Our topic next Sunday will be intergenerational families maintaining Indian culture in the diaspora. So we want to thank our planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir and Shalama Mohammed, to our IT consultants, and please visit, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to see all our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Dhanyavad.